Hello. Good good evening to Leroy and Jenny.
Hi,
Hello.
Priscilla.
Good evening.
Hello and hello friends on our Facebook Live. This is Priscilla from Speakers Connect. Today we are super excited to have our very beloved guest, Dr. Leroy Chiao, NASA astronaut and also International Space Station commander, and also Jamie, NASA certified master science teacher and also professional educator with us. We have announced about this chat about a week ago, and we have got so many interests and so many questions for you both. So we're so super excited to have you today.
Yeah, it's great to be here. This is exciting. Very happy to be participating in this fireside chat and looking forward to it.
So I know that it is evening time for you both in the US, right?
Right.
So thanks for making the time for us.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
It's not too late for me. I'm here in Colorado Springs, so it's only about 8 o'clock. And I was just listening to my neighbors howling for all the medical workers out there. So usually I would be out on my front porch howling about this time. So, but really excited.
You with your dog.
With my dog, yes.
Yeah, it's a little bit unusual time for all of us. So let's maybe, with so many lessons we can learn from you, Leroy. Before that, since we announced we have a lot of questions about space for you to start with. So
Sure.
Why don't we just maybe go through some of them, and then we can maybe also talk about your lessons for this very unusual time that we are having now. So the first question is actually from our 7-year-old friend, Arvid, and he has two questions for you. So the first one is, how did you feel when you were in space? And the second question was, have you ever seen a black hole?
Well, of course, getting into space was very exciting for me. I'd wanted to be an astronaut since I was young, since I was 8 years old, watching the first moon landing, Apollo 11 moon landing. And so actually getting into space, I wasn't sure quite what to expect. But once we got there, I was almost overwhelmed by the beautiful view. And, of course, you feel physically very different, too, because, of course, once you're weightless, you're floating and everything feels very different. So it was a little bit confusing and overwhelming and also very emotional because I was so excited to finally reach that goal of getting up into space. As far as seeing a black hole, no, definitely have not seen a black hole. We're actually, when we're up in orbit, we're only a little bit closer. We're only about 400 kilometers in altitude. And so we're not that much closer to the stars and planets as we are here on Earth. And so fortunately, we didn't see any black holes. Otherwise, if we'd gotten close enough to see one, we would have been pulled into it, I'm pretty sure. So fortunately, the nearest black hole is very, very far away from us.
Wow. So would you give some advice for the friends or the kids or if they are very interested in getting into this space profession, any advice that you would like to give them?
Sure. The advice I have to give to young people, no matter what you want to do, be an astronaut or anything else ever, is two things. You want to do as well as you can in school. So take your studies very seriously, do the very best you can at school. And then the second thing you want to do is to take care of your health. And so that means eating a proper diet, a healthy diet. That means getting enough sleep. We know now how important sleep is. It might surprise you to learn that the human brain continues to develop until around age 30. And so it's important to make that from a young age, but to continue it as you get older as well, as you go through your schooling and things like that. Also, of course, regular exercise, very, very important. We now know that is the single biggest factor of helping you maintain your short and long-term health. So that's the recipe for success. Do the very best you can in school and then take care of your health the best you can.
Yes, definitely. And we have another question for you from Timothy. And he would like to ask, what surprised you the most when you're in space?
Well, what surprised me the most, the first time I went into space, I told you how weird it is at first, both on the feeling on your body as well as the view of the Earth. But what surprised me is that after a few days, I got used to it. And so what surprised me is how adaptable human beings are. We just adapt to a new environment very quickly, and we learn how to work and operate in that new environment. So that really surprised me. The view of the Earth never got unspectacular, but we got used to it. I got used to looking out the window and seeing the beauty of the Earth. It was a little, in a way, a little disappointing.
Indeed. So, and we have another question for you from Rossetti. She would like to know, when you're back to Earth, would you enjoy moonlight more, or you miss the moonlight that you saw in space?
Well, we're not that much closer to everything up in space. The biggest difference is that the light from the stars and from our moon and from our sun don't have to go through all the Earth's atmosphere. It doesn't have to travel through the air. When it goes through the air, the intensity of the light is dimmed quite a bit, about 40% actually. And so everything is much brighter in space. The stars are much brighter. The moonlight is much brighter. Sun is very, very much brighter. And so that's the biggest difference. So no, I definitely loved going outside and seeing the stars and the moon. Of course, where Jamie lives, you get a better view up in the mountains, because you're away more from city lights and you get to see a lot more of the sky than here in Houston. But I still very much enjoy going out and looking at the moonlight.
Yes, indeed. So in regard to space, we have another friend have another question for you. Is so space for many people is actually an unknown. So how would you overcome fear when you, go so far away from Earth, and how you conquer fear when you're out there?
Sure, and the thing about fear in space flight is that all astronauts, we've thought about this, that most of us have wanted to do this since we were very young, and so we're willing to accept the risk. Of course, you're taking risk when you get inside of a spacecraft and launch on a rocket, and when you're up in space, of course, you're in a hostile environment with no air pressure, and with other things that you have to deal with, and then you have to be able to come home as well in that same spacecraft. And so, yes, there's definitely risk, but we very much a long time ago have decided that it's worth it. And so it's not really a fear that we dwell upon. We're aware of the risk, but a long time ago, we decided this is worth it. So you're not really afraid. There really is no fear. You've accepted that you're going to go take this risk.
Yes, and you have been trained well, and you are psychologically.
Yes, that's right. We've been trained in all the emergency procedures, so we know there are things that we can do in most, not all, in most emergency situations. And so we do try to anticipate and train for all those emergency cases.
Definitely.
And Leroy, would you go again?
I would definitely go again, especially if we were going somewhere like the moon or to Mars. I would love to go. I spent a little over 229 days in orbit, so I'm not as eager to go back to orbit. But if we were going to the moon or to Mars, I would definitely go.
Jamie, how about you? Would you?
Oh, I would be right there trying to get the seat next to him. So it was pretty interesting, and Leroy might talk about this, that the Japanese billionaire that's gonna take a group of his friends and orbit the moon.
Oh, right.
So I would like to be one of his friends.
Right. Yeah. You might have heard about SpaceX. Of course, Elon Musk is building what he calls his Starship and the Falcon Super Heavy rocket that will lift the Starship into space. And so, in addition to eventually going to Mars, he plans to use that as a version of that spacecraft to take people to Mars. But the first version of it is planned to go around the moon. And there's a Japanese billionaire that has put a lot of money into this project with SpaceX. And this Japanese billionaire and 15 of his friends will get to go fly in the first flight with astronauts on board to go around the moon. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, maybe in our lifetime, we can do it commercially.
Right, that's right.
So Leroy and Jamie, we are going through a very interesting time now. Not the easiest. A lot of people are now maybe facing a lot of stress and social isolation. We cannot see our friends. We cannot see our family. we know that astronauts in particular are trained experts in, managing stressful situations,
Right.
a lot of unknown in space. And most of the time you are living and working in near isolation. So would you mind share some practical tips with us, how we can manage the situation
Sure.
we are now
Yeah, you
facing?
bet. Absolutely. And our company, One Orbit, that we have together, we have developed a special program exactly on this topic. And, we talk about the parallels between long duration spaceflight, like I did on board the space station for 6.5 months, to our current situation. And then we also have a workshop that I'll let Jamie talk about that will help people to kind of do a deeper dive and some of these things. But basically, long duration spaceflight is very much like the situation we're in now. You're remote, you are communicating and dealing with people through products like this, video conference, telephone, email, things like that. And so it's very similar in that way. The things that are different is that, of course, I had a long time to think about being in isolation. I trained for 3.5 years and I knew what I was getting into. I also knew when we were coming back, right? And so those are two very big differences because this situation unfolded very rapidly for us. And suddenly we were all kind of isolated. The non-essential businesses were shut down. We were told to stay inside most of the time. Yeah, so that's the biggest thing. Uncertainty, we don't know when this will end. That's another big thing. The things that humans hate the most is uncertainty. We would prefer to hear bad news than uncertainty, because if you have bad news, at least you can begin to make plans on how you're going to deal with it, right? So those are the two biggest differences. And what I tell people is it's very important to set your expectations, right? Accept the fact that we just don't know. There's uncertainty. There's speculation. We might be able to come out of this in the summertime. We just don't know. If we come out and we find a flare up of the virus, we might have to go back into some kind of isolation. And so the thing you don't want to do, you don't want to set an artificial deadline, like say, oh, by the end of May, we'll be out, or by the end of June. And then because when those deadlines come and go, if we're not out, then you will be disappointed. And then you could get depressed and get into kind of a spiral where you start losing your motivation. And really what we're talking about, especially for businesses and business people, is how to keep them motivated, how to keep your employees motivated. Some other practical tips, or like you want to keep in touch with your family and your friends, send them emails, call them, do video conferences and things like that. It's important to keep that up. Even if you start getting depressed and demotivated, you might not even want to keep in touch with people, right? And then that makes things worse and you spiral down. So really make that effort. When I was aboard the space station, I always emailed a lot of people. We had a voice over IP phone. I could make short phone calls down. We had the opportunity for some video conferencing as well. And so I took advantage of all those things, and I would take pictures of special parts of the earth that meant something to a friend or someone I was close to, and then email it to that person. And that was very much appreciated. And in return, I would receive photographs and things like that from people on the earth, and that helped brighten my day up there as well. So those are just a couple of practical things to do. Also, I would encourage people to think about how to take advantage of this situation, how to turn a negative into a positive, make the lemonade out of the lemons. And that's going to be different for each person and for each business. But, you've got to try to take advantage of the situation you're in if you can.
Yes, and interesting you mentioned that we dislike uncertainty more than a real problem, because we do not know how to manage it. So
Right.
I think this is really good advice on how to keep connected, physically distancing, but not really social distancing that we always use the term, but that's not exactly
Right.
what we should do. So Jamie, any advice from your side? Maybe.
Yeah. So part of our program that we developed, we developed for what's going on in the world, right? And so our workshop really focuses on self-awareness, which I believe is key during this time. Someone like me, I'm an extrovert, so this is a huge challenge. I'm outside trying to talk to my neighbors nonstop and have, of course, at the proper distance. And so part of our workshop is we use a program, a personality assessment called the Color Code. And when we found this, as a teacher, I'd been through hours and hours of professional development using different programs. And I never found one that I really fell in love with. And so when I found the color code, I brought it to Leroy. And of course, as an engineer and as an astronaut, he kind of was really pretty skeptical. And they go through a full psychological evaluation at NASA. And so I brought this program to him and had him go through the preliminary tests that you can take for free online. And then we both became certified trainers. And so the color code focuses on your core motive. And so it comes from childhood, and your motive is what's going to drive your behavior. And if you can understand the motive, then you're going to understand where these behaviors come from. And so the color code is broken down into 4 colors, yellow, blue, red, white. I'm a yellow. So I'm motivated by fun. If it's not fun, it's really a challenge, but not everyone has that same core motive. So our blues, like Leroy, he's motivated by intimacy. So he wants to build a team, build relationships. He cares more about people than like how I am initially, is the fun side. The next one is red, and Leroy and I both have a lot of red. So you're not just one color, you're a mix of these 4 colors, and reds are motivated by power. So they want to get things done. They want point A to point B. We can usually quickly identify reds in our family. People like Elon Musk and Buzz Aldrin and Steve Jobs, definitely that red motive, and that drives that behavior. And then finally, we have our whites, and whites are motivated by peace. And so I have a daughter that's white. She avoids conflict at all costs. And so since I know that about her, it's helped a lot in my parenting, in my personal life, in my professional life. As Leroy and I have built this business One Orbit over the last 4 years, we've really relied on it to help us deal with our customers, to help us deal with our business relationship. In a small business, you're working closely together. In a large business, these skills and tips are very important, especially now. You do need people like me, like your yellows, to come into a Zoom meeting and bring some light, right? And then you need your reds to direct them, to tell them how to operate. Your blues are going to build those relationships within your organization, and then your white personalities are going to keep everyone working together without a huge amount of conflict. So it's been such a powerful tool for us, and there's a whole lot more to it, but it's really a great workshop, and it comes from we do some case studies from NASA. Of course, Leroy tells his personal stories. I talk about my personal stories, and it's just a really exciting, impactful program.
Thank you for that. And
yeah, and if I could just add real quickly, what I really like about this is, first of all, it's easy to remember what the colors mean, right? And so it's very simple. And so it's interesting to learn about yourself, but also you start to see in other people what types of people they are. And that allows you to shift your strategy of communication and dealing with those people to be more effective. And so what I also like is this is a core motive thing. We all have learned behaviors. We've learned how to behave certain ways, but under stress in an emergency, or under stress like everyone's under stress now, you revert back to your core motive, how you were when you were a child, basically, what you're really made of. And so for those reasons, I really like this color code.
Indeed, and very important to understand ourselves and our team. So exactly the next question we have from a lot of our friends actually is, now that many of us have to work from home, when we're working remotely, we're not seeing our colleagues every day. So any advice from you from maybe space, when you're on ISS and you have to work from NASA on Earth, how you can manage remote teams better?
Sure, of course, working remotely is never as effective or impactful as working together face-to-face, things like that. But, what we can do is follow kind of a model that we do aboard the space station and other remote things that seem to work pretty well. So, for example, in the mornings, or when we would wake up aboard the space station, we would have a few minutes to kind of get cleaned up, but then we would have a conference with the mission control centers, and we would talk to our mission control centers for a few minutes. We would review the schedule of what we were going to do that day, and then we would sign off, and then we would be free to, go about and begin our day. And so we would work to a schedule, and then we would, at the end of the day, we would have another communication session with the mission control centers and talk about what we had accomplished. And of course, during the day, when we had questions or needed discussion, or there was something that called for it, we would again establish communication with the Mission Control Center, talk to certain specialists and ask questions or receive special instructions, things like that. So we can work remotely the same way. You can have a tag, if you're leading a company, you can have a tag up in the morning, be a video conference, and then talk about what you're going to do. And then of course, during the day, if you do need to communicate, people can call each other, they can initiate smaller meetings, things like that. And then at the end of the day, you can have another group tag up to discuss any accomplishments and issues, things like that. So the key, I think, is to work most of the time asynchronously. And again, in other words, you don't want to spend your whole day sitting in front of a computer on video conferences. You kind of tag up to stay synchronized, but then you work asynchronously. And I think the effective blend of that works pretty well.
Yeah, so having the system in place and having the technology in place is also very, very important.
Yes,
a lot of people, when they suddenly have to face the remote work arrangement, they may have to spend some time to actually get all the technical stuff or even the computers set up in place. But once those are ready, then we should manage better from then on.
Yes, definitely.
How about you, Jamie? Any other points you would like to add?
Oh yeah, and I completely agree with Leroy when he's talking about asynchronous and synchronous learning. I know all of our teachers out there, thank you for watching and listening. Leroy and I have a bunch of teachers all over the world that are in this huge challenge of education, and it was so unexpected. I know that they never dreamed of being in this situation and so quickly, and I've been impressed with how fast so many teachers have switched to the model that Leroy's talking about, the synchronous asynchronous learning. And I think it's going to transition. Of course, businesses are now looking at that as a new way of operations. So it's pretty exciting, and there's a lot of opportunities out there. We'll just see how it plays out.
Yeah, so and other questions that we have is kind of like an interesting twist of the remote work scenario. Now that we are spending much more time at home with our family, well, we're sheltered at home, unavoidably, sometimes there would be some conflict because we do not used to spend so much time with each other. And in that case, may I know, do you have any advice on that? Maybe knowing each other's personality and ourselves would help, but any other advice that we can learn?
Sure, absolutely. And you're absolutely right. We've seen on the news that, unfortunately, the domestic disturbances and conflict is up for those reasons that you just mentioned. Aboard the space station, of course, the crews have trained together for a long time. They've been put together carefully so that the personalities match. The Russians have been flying long duration flights a lot longer than we have, and they started in the 1970s. And back then, they would arbitrarily put people together and launch them to a space station for 6 months. And they found out very quickly they couldn't do that because you're in a small space, you're together, and if the personalities don't match, then you quickly develop conflict. And there are cases, at least 2 cases, where they had to end missions early because the people were literally ready to kill each other and stop talking to each other. And so, of course, matching up as best you can is important. But the one thing about being in space, the big difference is you physically can't separate. If you're in a small space station, it's difficult to separate. Here on Earth, fortunately, here in Houston, in the US, in most places, you can still go out and take walks. You can still go out and exercise. And so, take your dog for a walk, things like that. So I think when the tension starts building, it's important to recognize that and to physically leave for a while and cool off, kind of let yourself calm down. And I think you can take your phone with you, maybe call a friend or someone close to you to vent, to kind of help you calm down. And we have to help each other. Right. And so sometimes you'll be on the receiving end of those phone calls, and sometimes you'll be the one making the phone call, maybe. But I think that's the big plus, is that we can physically separate at least for a little while and kind of cool off.
Yes.
And I think remembering to have a sense of humor, that's very important in any stressful situation. We found that, you know, a sense of humor, positive attitude are going to take you a long way. When everything's taken from you, the one thing that we do have control over is our attitude.
Right,
Yes.
right. And a good example of that is when we had a food shortage during the first part of our space station mission. And it turned out the crew before us had gotten into our food, and there was some error in the accounting. And so we ended up with a pretty significant food shortage for about 4 weeks. So we had to ration food, and we dealt with it with humor. We joked about how full we were and how we couldn't eat anymore. And we were trying to get people from the ground to send us jokes. And that really helped us to deal with the situation.
Mm-hmm. I also remember that you mentioned you have to actually exercise a lot when you're in space.
Right.
Even though it's quite a confined area, it's quite similar to what we're going through now. Won't you mind share a little bit more on that?
Yes, right. So physically, it's very important to exercise in space, because here on Earth, if you're not exercising, at least you're walking and you're getting some exercise. Up in space, you're literally not using hardly any muscles. Your bones aren't really being loaded up at all. And so if you didn't exercise, your muscles would quickly atrophy. You would quickly start losing bone mass, and your heart and your circulation system would quickly get out of shape, right? And so we have to exercise 2 hours every day up on space. We have special machines that let us do aerobic exercise, just like here on Earth, to keep your heart and your circulatory system in shape. We have special machines that allow us to do resistance exercises to mimic the effects of weightlifting or physical push-ups, sit-ups, things like that. And so it's important to do that in space for that reason, but it also helps you with your emotional or your mental state, right? And so I find that to be true on Earth too. Of course, I exercise. I know Jamie does too. We exercise every day, and that helps not only keep us physically fit, but for me, that's the best time of the day, is when I've finished exercise. My mind is very clear. I feel good. I feel any stress that I had has been kind of worked out a little bit after physical exercise. So I think maintaining an exercise regimen here on Earth is very important for the same reasons, but not as drastic, not as critical as being in space, but also still very important.
Yes, indeed, indeed. We have a lot of practical tips today. So we have to be realistic of the situation. We have to keep fit. We have to keep motivated, have each other out. And we also have to be very focused on what we're doing and try to focus and do a even better job, even though the situation is not as normal as we expected it to be. So before we end this chat today, we are very privileged to have almost like 30 minutes with you both. So friends are very happy about that. Maybe one more advice or suggestions for us to cope with the situation while we are like halfly still shelter at home, and how to cope with the situation?
Right. I think it's important to help each other, and we talked about some of that, taking phone calls from people who are upset and listening to them. But it's, just little things really help a lot. So you can help your neighbors and help your friends, by doing little things for them. And one example is during the food shortage I mentioned up in space. I took some of the food that we had and I hid it, and then I took it out on a special occasion and had it prepared a special meal, and so that made my Russian crewmate Salajan very happy. And we also did things like I surprised him with a phone call from one of his favorite music stars, and we were able to arrange that through NASA. So we had a special call where we were able to talk to, and so little things like that are very much appreciated, and kind of keep your spirits up. You have to help keep each other's spirits up, and so little things really go a long way.
Definitely. How about you, Jamie?
I think we have to be okay with forgiving ourselves. The fact that these are challenging times, where this is all a new situation. Of course, being empathetic to others, being empathetic to our children that are going through the grief of not going to school or not going into an office and not being able to socialize and things. And that's, there is a loss there. And I think it's okay to forgive yourself, and you don't have to have the perfect day every day, and you can give yourself a break every now and again. I see a lot of people out there that can be pretty hard on themselves, and like Leroy said, we're all in this together. There's no one that right now is leaving their house. We're all, and not just here in the U.S., but Priscilla, you're in Hong Kong. You started this earlier than we did, and so just being okay with letting yourself have some.
Yes, indeed, I feel like watching a movie unfold. So
yes,
right.
this is a interesting time, and but I think at the same time it gives us the space to be more innovative, to try new things.
Yes.
Okay, so physically we cannot do things. How about we try virtual stuff? So I think this is actually the time that we know something we should be doing for very long, but we just put it off because we have other alternatives. Now we just have to do it. So I think yeah, maybe that's silver lining in every situation. Yeah, but things seems to touch wood being improving. So we hope that it is the way, but we have to do our part to keep each other safe as well. Meanwhile, let's focus on our work. But today we are really very privileged to have Jamie and Leroy with us. So friends, if you have more questions, I know you definitely have more questions, but it's getting quite late, so we have to let both of them go very soon. But do contact us, and if you're interested in any of the program or presentations by Jamie and Leroy, just let us know, and we hope that we can also have another chat with you very soon as well.
Great. Well, it's been wonderful to be on. Thanks for having us. Definitely, it was very enjoyable, and like you say, we're all adapting to the new way. So let's make the best of it.
Thank you so much, and keep safe, stay well, and we see each other very soon.
All right. And I have to say bye to my mom and dad, I'm sure, are on here watching. my blue parents are probably out there somewhere. So I'll have to check my phone. So I just got to say hi, Mom, hi, Dad.
Blue parents and yellow yourself, and then white. Nice. Okay, so see you.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.